Okay, so we're about to record a new episode of Beyond Boards, and for this episode, me, John Dahlquist of Bryggeriets Gymnasium, Malmö has hijacked Beyond Boards, making Quentin, and as Quentin always says, I'm going to butcher his name, Quentin Delille.
No, that's good. That's perfect. Very
nice.
Good.
So I'm going to try to make this a tribute to Quentin and Beyond Boards and try to not make it my podcast, but to keep the same format as always. So I start off by saying, welcome back to Beyond Boards, a podcast dedicated to the actions and interests of skateboarders beyond skateboarding. My guest today is Quentin Delille. Quentin is a renowned podcaster. He has been interviewing people from all over the world and from all sides of skateboarding. In recent years, he has intensified his obsession with knowing everything about all things skateboarding and just finished episode number 100. The initial idea was to put the pod to rest, but his friends, fans and supporters got him on better thoughts and managed to hijack the pod for episode 100 plus or 101, forcing the perfectionist from Paris to keep going. This is my conversation with Quentin. I hope you enjoy it. So I'm just going to give a small introduction, and then when I'm done, I hope you can correct me and also add if I missed anything. So I know you were born in Geneva, where you got into skating as a kid, but a broken ankle held you back from giving it a full go. Instead, other aspects of skate nerd stuff sparked you. You also had 2 practical placements at skate shops. You have 3 older, talented, beautiful and wonderful sisters, and you have lived in the US twice, once between 1988 and 1990, and then later in life, I think you spent time and lived in New York City. You have traveled a lot and visited and or lived in New Zealand, Australia, the US, South Africa, and more. You always had an easy time learning new things in school as well as adult life, and is eager to dig deep into anything you find interesting. As an extremely tidy person, people around you have always called you a perfectionist, and you have an eye for detail. You find it sloppy to send time codes to your guests' quotes without writing the exact hour, minute, and second of every quote. One of your interests have been wine, and you got so interested in it that it got too much. And since April 12th, 2020, you have been sober, which seems like a good choice. This sparked an interest in other people's journeys in sobriety, and Beyond Boards prequel was actually called Beyond Bars. Now that your health is of utmost importance, veganism seems like the natural choice. But still, you eat more chips and chips and chips and vegan treats than most carnivores. And also for a vegan, it's a bit odd that you love beaver tail so much. To compensate for all the chips, you run. As with the pod, you're a firm believer that anything in life should be approached as a marathon rather than a sprint. And you admire the Japanese approach to learning things, going all the way. As a side note, it's worth mentioning that if you Google something, it always takes you down a rabbit hole where time and reason disappears. A lot of people don't know that you're a cineast, and if it wasn't for the skate pod, you would most definitely run a film pod. You have also become known for your integrity, and even if there's been offers on the table, it's of importance to you that the pod is done your way without interference of ads or other things that you cannot stand for. which goes for the pod as well as all the values in the rest of your life. But most importantly, you are a humble person who hates to be in the limelight, and being a guest on your own podcast is one of the most uncomfortable yet thrilling things you have ever done. Welcome to Beyond Board's Quentin Delille.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Half of this I know are facts and half of it I made up along the way. Can you point out where I went wrong or where my imagination got the best of me?
One thing, you said I was born in Geneva. I was actually born in Grenoble. That's near the Alps. It's not very far from Geneva, but it's in France. It's not in Switzerland. And what else? You talked about beaver tail. I don't know if I'm that much a fan of that, but I tried it before in Canada. It's pretty sick, but it's not something I have access to on a regular basis. But yeah, no, apart from that, pretty much everything was accurate. So yeah, Thank you.
And I thank all the people, aka your sisters, who have been kind enough to
tell you about my obsession with chips and vegan treats. Yeah.
Yeah, you could probably figure out where some of that information came from.
Most definitely.
The rest with the rabbit holes and Googling and sending time codes and stuff that I made up just out of experience.
Our interactions, yeah.
But let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up and where?
Well, I was born in Grenoble, as I said, so that's about an hour and a half from Geneva. It's in the Alps. Grew up there, and I lived also near Geneva when I was a teenager, from 10 to 15. That's where I started skating, when I was 13 in the year 2000. And skate, like you said earlier, I think I skated really from 13 to 20, like all the time. It was like an obsession. Just like for everybody who really gets into it. And at 20 years old, I broke basically my ankle, but a specific bone in my ankle. And skating has never been the same since, unfortunately. And I tried to get back into it multiple times, but I never really felt comfortable anymore on my board. Like I still roll around, but that's pretty much it. Like even ollies are like painful and difficult. So.
And in the year 2000, that must have been when Baker America video games were big. How did you get into skating?
Well, I think what I recall is that I wanted to actually buy rollerblades, and
we'll edit this out.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Well, exactly. I'll throw that out. And my mom gave me like a Decathlon, for the Americans, it's like a sports chain in Europe. And they had like a leaflet of some sort, and there was a skater in there. And I looked at, and it was like kind of ridiculous because that guy was wearing like cargo pants, like reef shoes, like how do you call those? Like
bucket hat?
Bucket hat, thank you. Yeah, he looked like a dork, but and he was on a longboard, not on a skateboard. But I felt like, oh, this is cool. Like I want to do that, And so I bought a board at Decathlon, but it was a shit board and it wasn't really enjoyable. And then my mom, I don't know why, she was like, oh, let's get you to a real skate shop. Like my friend knows this skate shop in Grenoble called La Glisse. And so we went there, and just like for every kid, who gets into skating, this magical moment of entering a skate shop and seeing the board, seeing a skate video on the screen, seeing the racks of clothes, the smells, everything. It was like a revelation, It's like, oh my God, this is so sick, And I came into the skate shop, and then this, I bought a Mike Vallely, a Black Label board with like a green.
Oh, Black Label.
Back in the day, was skating for them at that time. And about that board, it had like kind of like a green fluorescent elephant on it. And about that board, and like the guy in the store did an ollie in front of me, a stationary ollie. I had never seen an ollie, not even in a video. Because we're talking, this is in the year 2000. I hadn't opened a magazine. I hadn't seen a skate video. I've never seen skateboarding in front of my eyes. So I was like, how the fuck did you do that? Like, it's insane. And so that started my obsession with skating. So yeah, that's how it all started.
Nice. But who's one of the first people that influenced you, except Mike Vallely, that has actually been on the pod?
Oh, that's a good question.
Is there any of the early heroes?
Very, very early, I'm not sure, because I think one of my first really favorite skater was probably Eric Costin, because Manic Marty was one of the first videos I watched.
Yep.
Well, I could say, I mean, one guy, the very first skate video I watched was Cliché Europa, first Cliché video in 97, that came out in 97. I watched it in the year 2000. And I wouldn't say he was not necessarily my favorite skater in the video, but Jérémy Daclin, the owner and founder of Cliché.
Yeah, he had last part in that video too.
Yeah, and he's amazing, and I got to interview him a while back. It's been a minute, but it was a trip for me to interview him, and also interview Ben Doren, the guy who made the video. That was episode 13, right after yours. So yeah, to get to interview those guys was a trip for me at the time, and still is. I mean,
I can only imagine. But this, I think one thing that stands out in your interviews, except from, you actually did not do this once. The only time I've heard it was in the Bobby Puglio interview, when I think he mentioned Mike Daher, and you did not know that he was on stereo, I think. But other than that, through 100 episodes, I've never heard you say that you didn't know who someone was or what year something came out, or another reference that any random guest had done. But did this interest of, the nerdy stuff in skateboarding come through the podcast, or was that from the get-go?
I think it was already there. Like I told you, I started in the year 2000. I first consumed skate videos on VHS and DVDs, bought magazines, whatever I could find. And I'm very grateful I got to experience skateboarding before YouTube, before Instagram and all that stuff, because it was a lot more rare and more precious. Even, I'm not saying it's bad now, I love it, but it's different, And so that gave me a deep appreciation for, just how rich, how vast this whole culture is. And so that's something that I've always carried with me, even long after I stopped skating, which was at 20 years old. And so I've always, kept an eye on what was going on in skateboarding. And of course, me starting this podcast was also inspired by the Nine Club, by The Bunt, who had been, doing their podcast for a few years before I started mine. And I love their podcast to this day. I still, tune in every now and then, especially The Bunt. But I felt like they were interviewing, like there were some people that you didn't really see or hear on their shows. And I felt like that was too bad. And there was probably room for another podcast that could, go into other directions and not necessarily only interview California pro skaters or American skaters or pro skaters in itself, just also interview people who do other shit with skateboarding. And so that was the whole thing for me, like to interview people that do stuff with skateboarding, and also sometimes interview my favorite skaters, just as a kind of a selfish endeavor. But yeah, that was pretty much the idea for me to do that.
Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that stands out listening to your interviews is that you really seem like the most interested person on the pod, whereas a lot of times it's about getting your opinion across or talking about cool shit, whereas your way of doing it comes from a whole different universe of intrigued, I would say, from the outside looking in. And that's why I wanted to know if there's other things besides skateboarding or before skateboarding that has had the same sort of function in your life. And from what I understand, coffee or long coffee breaks is a good start if you want to be a good listener and a good interviewer. And that your interest in hip-hop is also of the more nerdy kind, but only the tip of the iceberg compared to how much you're into comic books and also cinema. Am I missing anything?
Yeah, no. I mean, that's pretty true. I wouldn't say I'm a big... I'm not so knowledgeable about hip-hop. Like, I love it, but I'm not like... I'm not nearly as knowledgeable as I am about skateboarding or wine or cinema. But yeah, no, I think skateboarding has always been, since my 13th birthday, it's always been my main obsession. Then for a long time it was wine, but it wasn't necessarily an obsession. It was just something I enjoyed, learning about, tasting, discovering, and whatever, and diving deep into, because kind of like skateboarding, it's like a very vast and rich world, and you can really, there's just so many things to explore in there, and just like music, just like anything. But yeah, no, for me it's always been about skateboarding, and then right after it is probably cinema. Even though it's again, I'm not as knowledgeable about cinema as I am about skating. But yeah.
Okay, so going to a deserted island, you get to bring one hip-hop album, one comic book, one movie, and one thing skateboarding. It could be either a spot, a video, or a book or a magazine, or a piece of clothing.
Okay.
and a bottle of wine. And you don't have to worry because you can actually enjoy the bottle of wine because there won't be another one because you're on a deserted island.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. That's interesting. Hip-hop album, I think, I mean, that's a basic answer, but if I had to listen to just one album for the rest of my life, it's probably 36 Chambers by Wu-Tang Clan. I mean, that's an all-time classic, of course.
We're going to the same island, you and I.
Yeah, you're welcome. We can share a little space on the beach. So 36 Chambers. What did you say? A movie?
A movie, comic book, and one skateboard item.
Movie. The one that always pops up to my head when I think of my favorite movies is probably The Royal Tenenbaums by Wes Anderson. It's not necessarily in French we say un chef-d'œuvre, like a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. Like for example, 2001 by Kubrick is a masterpiece. It's like an incredible film, but I don't know if I would want to watch that over and over and over. But The Royal Tenenbaums is a movie that really gives me a smile because of how I discovered it, because of digging deep into Wes Anderson movies afterwards and everything. So that's always like a fond memory for me. So that's probably a movie I would love to watch again and again and again. Comic books, I'm not sure. I don't necessarily have a very favorite one, but one that really stuck with me. It's not a fun one, but it's an important one. It's called Mouse, by Art Spiegelman.
Yeah.
That's one that really, I don't remember how old I was when I discovered it, but it really made a lasting impression on me. It's such a beautiful, moving, important book. So that one really sticks with me.
Is it about the Nazis?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's the story of basically the author, Art Spiegelman, interviews his dad who was a prisoner at Auschwitz.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have read it.
One of the best ever, probably comic books, graphic novels that you could get your hands on. So that's really a go-to for me. But it's of course very heavy and really sad, and so it's not really a fun, enjoyable read. But it's a necessary one for sure, especially nowadays. And then something related to skating. That's an impossible question to answer, but I guess one thing is probably if I could have access to all of Eric Swisher's Cronball interviews, that's something, if they were printed or something, I don't know, I would take that with me because there's just so much to dive into. And and his interviews for me have always and to this day remained the best. And I'm kind of following his path modestly, and just aspiring to follow what he's done. So.
And when I hear those answers, or anyone hears those answers, what do you think that says about you, or what conclusions do you think a person could make by hearing those specific answers?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trapped in this body and in this mind, so I have no idea how people will see this from the outside. But I don't know. Probably that hopefully modest, or maybe a little bit too modest at times. I don't know.
To me, it sounds like it's a person who's really into quality and, like you said yourself, admire masterpieces and like to investigate and understand masters.
Sure.
That almost goes through all the answers.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's definitely what I'm trying to do with this podcast, interview all the people that I consider masters in skateboarding culture. All of them, everybody I've ever interviewed is someone that I admire, whose contributions to skateboarding, whether it's, Dani Abuhawa and her written work and her art. For me, that's as valuable as interviewing Anthony Van Engelen a couple of days ago. Of course, they're not on the same level of notoriety and fame in skateboarding culture, but for me, they're equally as interesting. And so for me, those are people that I really enjoy getting to talk to and hearing their perspectives on skateboarding and how it shaped their lives and everything. So.
Yeah, and as are you, because all of a sudden you're put in this picture of collecting all this information and stories, and all of a sudden you start becoming the story and your legacy of Beyond Boards. But actually want to go all the way back, and I think to do so we need probably to start as something you mentioned a lot of times, but never have gone into depth on April 12th, 2020, and Beyond Bars. Can you tell a little bit about the backstory? From what I understand, you studied to become a sommelier, and that eventually led into alcohol problems, which led into Beyond Bars, and then that led into Beyond Boards, and now we're here.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's true. I'm gonna try not to be too long, but basically I started, like everybody, I started drinking alcohol when I was like 15 or something, and from 15 to 18 I was drinking just like probably every teenager does, just drinking beers, whatever. Skateboarding was still my main obsession, so I wasn't necessarily that interested in drinking, even though I did see that it changed how I felt, how confident I felt, being a little drunk and everything. And I think actually not being able to skateboard anymore, I don't know if that necessarily is the reason I became an alcoholic, but it definitely didn't help that I couldn't skate, because skateboarding was a form of escape for me when I started it as a teenager. And so I guess not being able to skate anymore, or not feeling like I couldn't skate like I used to, because that was the most difficult part to accept. Like I can't skate like I used to,
Yeah.
And so anyways, so I kind of dug deep into wine and then made it my job basically, and started working first in exports. I lived in New York City, like you mentioned, for a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
I was actually doing more like...
Isn't that bread to the baker, going from France to the US to work with wine?
Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, for me, honestly, I did this. I studied wine and wine like business, basically, with the intention of working in exports. Because as you know, I speak pretty good English, and I was like, oh, I can use this and just go sell wine in the States or wherever, and so my first job in New York after my studies was in New York, and I was helping French wine producers to find importers to work with in the States. So I wasn't importing wine myself. I was more a facilitator, putting people in touch. So that was my job. And the only reason basically I went was to be able to live in New York, because I always dreamt of living in New York. I had already been when I was a teenager and loved it and felt it was the most amazing city. And I got to live there from 24 to 26 and was making decent money. And it was a dream. It was 2 of the best years of my life. It was absolutely incredible. I skated a bit when I was there. I was only, just rolling around, but I bought I still have the same cruiser board over there. It's like a old skate mental board with like big longboard wheels. And I would skate around Manhattan and all over New York with that and just, explore basically. And so, yeah, anyways, to go back to wine. So wine, became a bit too much. And for a long time, I was very conscious that my consumption was way too important. But I also felt like, I can still hold a job. I can still, have a pretty regular life or something. I can still control it to a degree. Then in March 2020, COVID started, and I got kind of trapped in my parents' vacation home in Brittany. I was very lucky to be able to be there during the quarantine. We had a very severe lockdown here in France for the first 2 months of COVID pandemic. And I was there, and that time being there, kind of trapped in this house, basically with my cousins. The first month I was drinking every day, all day, just like I always did, kind of. And then after a month, I woke up one day and just felt, actually, this is the best moment to stop. Like, this is the moment. Like, I'm away from work. I'm away from my toxic friends that I drink with. I couldn't dream of a better situation or scenario to try to stop drinking, which I had been trying for a long time, for years before. I had been able to be sober for like a couple months back in 2016 or 17 or something, but then started again. And so, yeah, I stopped drinking. And as I stopped, I really, realized how toxic it had become in my life. It had taken everything over, and it was fucking up my liver. It was I had blackouts pretty much every day for, 15 plus years. So my brain is completely fried from alcohol. So that's what made me stop drinking. And then as an effort to learn more about alcoholism and sobriety, I was trying to find podcasts about addiction, because at that point I was listening to the Nine Club and the Bunt again, and other podcasts a little bit. And I couldn't really find any very inspiring podcasts about addiction, which I found odd. I was like, this is such a essential subject. Like, why is nobody talking about this, or at least not doing a proper job, with it? And so I started this podcast, but it was, looking back now, it was really kind of a therapeutical effort for me, really something to, just get information from people who had been sober for a long time and find, advice, recommendations and all that stuff.
I couldn't find it. Is it out there, and is it skateboard based, or is it...
I did only 12 episodes. Most of them are in French. I think there's only 2 in English. And the 2 in English are with pro skaters. One is Neil Mims, and the other one is Brandon Turner. And and yeah, I was actually surprised to get them on, because one of the inspirations for me to get sober was actually listening to the Nine Club and hearing, for example, Andrew Reynolds or Neil Mims or other people talk about their sobriety. And for me to kind of see, oh, these guys are sober, that's incredible. Like, for me, these guys are rock stars. They're like the coolest guys in the universe. And for me, being sober equaled, being boring and being, you're not enjoying life. Like, if you don't drink alcohol, like, what the fuck are you doing, And so for me, it really clicked, like, oh my God, like, Andrew Reynolds is sober and he's like skating better than ever in his like late 30s. It's so inspiring. And so that really planted a scene in my mind. I was like, okay, like, actually being sober could be a very desirable thing, But it took me a while until I actually, did it. But I'm really glad I did it. I'm coming up on 5 years, and it's...
Oh, nice. Well done. It's interesting with me being sort of one skateboard generation above you. We never really had any role models who were sober. They were sort of the odd ones, or saw in the gutter before they became sober, and it was sort of hard to relate. Whereas the way I hear young skaters talk about, especially Andrew Reynolds, but basically all of the Baker Boys, is with inspiration that sobriety can be quote unquote cool.
Yeah.
Which is really, a sort of a new thing in skateboarding. The same way with Casper Brooker in his video for the Ben Ramers Foundation, Smile, where he just looks so fucking cool that it seems, just bad to be anywhere close to alcohol if that's what it takes to be that cool.
Yeah.
But with Reynolds, I've read or heard interviews with him saying that everyone needs to find their own bottom before you can change. And that's an individual path. Mm-hmm. And my question that I wanted to ask you along the same lines is, do you think there's more than one kind of alcoholism? And do you have to let the person go until it's over and done for that person in terms of their own choice? Or is it possible to sort of stop someone halfway when you notice it's going sort of the wrong way?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer, but I feel like, there's definitely multiple forms of alcoholism. At least that's what I think or feel. I drank in the evenings, for example. I would never drink, for example, I wouldn't wake up and drink a bottle of vodka jumping out of bed, I would usually drink in the evening, but whenever I had one sip of beer, it was done. Like, I could not stop myself. Like, I couldn't control myself anymore. So that was my thing. Like, it was either all in or nothing, Mm-hmm. There was no kind of, I'm just going to have one beer and go home, like that never happened. And so that's my alcoholism. But some people have it way gnarlier. Like, they'll fucking, go do hard drugs. They'll get themselves in really dangerous situations. And I was lucky that I didn't go that far into it, And for example, that's just a stupid example, but for example, my grandpa, who's dead now, who died a couple years ago, he was for me, he was an alcoholic. He was drinking, I think, 2 to 3 bottles of wine a day for God knows how long, 60, 70 years or something crazy like that. And he couldn't do without it. Like, and whenever the bottle of wine was too far from his reach on the table, he would kind of be like, "Hey, bring it back," he was worried, So that for me is alcoholism. Even though he probably didn't live it like I did, but it was another form of alcoholism for him. And to answer your question, I don't know about reaching a bottom. For example, for me, like I had reached one really severe bottom in 2017 17 when I broke up with my ex-girlfriend at the time and drank myself to basically death and woke up in my bed. I had a piece of glass all over my body. I got up from bed, walked on some glass, split open my foot. Like it was horrible. Like I woke up, it was probably the worst fucking day or night or waking up from alcohol of my life. And that day I decided, okay, I need to stop drinking. Like this is becoming too hard. And I stopped, but just 2 months. And then after 2 months, it was like, at one point I was like, oh, fuck it, I'll just have a beer. And for a couple of days, I could still, I felt like I could manage it. You know, I could have one, maybe two. But within 2 weeks, I was back to drinking huge amounts. So I thought that was my bottom, you know, that was like the gnarly kind of horrible scenario that you see in movies and you're like, oh shit, like that's the tipping point where you're like, okay, now I need to stop this shit, you know? But for me, it was actually being in Brittany and being quarantined, lockdown, something I had, of course, never lived before, and not knowing how long we're going to be stuck there. And just one morning, just like, oh, actually, yeah, it's true. I'm away from work. I can't go to a bar because all the bars are closed. I'm in the middle of nowhere, you know, like it's not like there's some cool wine bars nearby. So actually this is a good moment. Like this is the best moment. Just an intuition, you know, like, oh, okay, this is actually a good situation right now.
And also maybe a situation when it sinks in, when everything else around is silent and not makes all these marks. Because I think alcoholism is a funny diagnosis that no one really gives you, that you only give yourself. You can't go to a doctor, or someone could tell you, but you wouldn't believe it unless it makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Whereas there's maybe, I'm not sure, but a kind of alcoholism that is so long term and where you lead a full life with work and everything, but where the alcohol just makes you feel you're not homeless, you have a job, but there's a lot of anxiety and it costs, and it will cost you in the long run, which is maybe harder to detect and is okay by all standards. And that's I wouldn't say fascinating, but it's an interesting aspect of the role alcohol plays in probably, I know in France, but also in Swedish culture.
Yeah. Well, all over the world, I think, most countries have issues with alcoholism, but of course, France is special in the sense that we're a famous wine producing country, and wine has a special place in our culture. And so in that sense, I think people tend to look at like heavy drinkers with more compassion, or like, oh, it's okay, it's wine, you know. It's not but whereas if you were, I don't know, shooting heroin or doing coke or something, of course people would be like appalled and like, oh my god.
Yeah, don't worry, it's good heroin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's good shit, whatever. But yeah, no, we have kind of this false just vision of alcohol like it's a great thing. It is to a degree. I mean, wine is still great. It's interesting and everything, but it's also a very addictive substance, and it's something you need to be very cautious with, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think that's always important to hear, and especially without passing any judgment. But before we go on to the next subject, or turn into how Beyond Boards came about, we should probably just add that if you know anyone who has problems, or you have problems yourself, the hardest and best and easiest thing to do is just to reach out to whoever is sitting next to you and opening the lid and say something. Yeah. And then you've at least done something, and that alcoholism and all types of addictions and silence is the worst combination. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. No, I agree 100%. Yeah.
All right. Thanks. And then when and how did Beyond Bars turn into Beyond Boards?
So I was doing Beyond Bars from October 2020 to February, March 2021, around there. So just a few months, not a very long time. I did 12 episodes, like I said earlier. And I really enjoyed doing episodes, and I was surprised by how accessible, for example, Neil and Brandon turned out to be. Because for me, like, these guys are rock stars, so like, why would they even want to do an interview with some random dude in France, you know? But I think they were touched by, you know, how I approached them, and, you know, my going sober recently and everything. And they probably just wanted to, you know, salute the effort and just show, solidarity of some sort. I don't know. And so I was getting close to a year of sobriety in February 2021. And I was feeling more comfortable in this new kind of skin or identity because, again, I had built my whole adult life around drinking. It was my work, it was my social life, it was everything. And so to remove drinking was terrifying because, like, who the fuck am I if I'm not, working in a wine bar? Who am I if I'm not drinking when I see my friends? How am I enjoying myself on a date if I'm not having a beer? Everything had to be reconfigured. It was terrifying, and the first few months of sobriety was really, really difficult. But good for me, it was the middle of the COVID pandemic, so that definitely helped. Being isolated helped, at least for me, to be really on my own and not having too much social life and everything, and keeping to myself. That really helped for the very first few weeks of sobriety. But I was getting towards this first year of sobriety, and I had enjoyed doing this podcast, but I didn't want to, dwell on sobriety. It was not necessarily a subject I was passionate about as I am about skateboarding. And of course, it's something, there's probably hundreds of podcasts about sobriety, probably thousands, and it's an endless subject that is very worth, diving into. But I was not passionate about it, so I felt like, okay, like I'm getting more comfortable. I don't want to, talk about this all the time for every interview and episode that I put out. And so the idea for doing a skateboarding podcast sort of came to mind, but I was feeling a little shy about it because I was like, I don't even skate, like I skated when I was way back in the day, and I have no connections to anybody in the industry. Like who the fuck am I to do a podcast? Like the Nine Club has Chris Roberts and Kelly Hart. The Bund guys are like really good skaters, and like they were sponsored and everything. So I felt like, oh, these guys are in a different realm, like I'm not at all near that. So at first I was like, no, that's a stupid idea. Like, who am I to do something like this? But then I felt like, okay, I mean, I still got to interview Brandon and Neil, so why not? Maybe I should give this a try and just do a couple episodes, maybe 6, maybe 12, like I did for Beyond Bars. And so that's how I started doing Beyond Boards. And I wasn't necessarily stoked on the title, Beyond Boards, at the beginning, because I wanted to find something that had a more resonance in skateboarding culture. I was trying to think of something really nerdy that only, hardcore skater nerds would know about, and I was like, oh, I should call it something stupid and obscure that only, the nerdiest skaters would know about.
What were some of the titles on the list?
One of them was Fandangle, but I was like, this sounds stupid, like Fandangle podcast. And I can't remember the other ones.
What is that?
Fandangle is, Costin had this photo back in the day doing 1 foot switch backside nose grind on a handrail in LA somewhere. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's either a 4-star or a girl ad, I think.
Is it a mock-up?
Well, I think it's a mock-up, but I think he actually tried that trick and got pretty close to it's a pretty funny photo because he's like, I'll send it to you. It's hard to describe, but he's basically
it's the same series with the BA on 2 penny boards as sort of rollerblades and or is it Alex Olson for a series of just dumb skate photos?
I think it was ironical. I think it was sarcastic and not serious, but it was, I think he said in interviews later that he was actually getting close to doing that trick.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't a complete joke, It was somewhat true. But anyway, it was something that came to mind, like, oh, this is really something obscure, that could be fun. But I was still struggling to find the name, and then my friend Julien, who is not a skater at all, he was like, well, why don't you call it Beyond Boards? And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of stupid. But then he was like, yeah, but it's kind of the whole thing. Like, you're talking about skating, but way beyond skating, I'm not talking about how you do your kickflips. You're talking about all the other things skateboarding has brought into your life. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe, I mean, why not? Like, I'm not going to stay stuck with this name thing. I'll just go with that and we'll figure it out as we go along.
It's a great name.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Julien. Thank you to Julien for suggesting that. Even though I wasn't stoked at first, it definitely worked out, so yeah.
And who was the first guest? Was it Nestor Judkins?
Yeah, Nestor Judkins. Yeah, that was fun. It was I reached out to him, so we probably did this interview in March 2021. And pretty quickly after, I recorded I think the 2 or 3 first ones within a few weeks, and then I started releasing them. Because my objective at first was to do 1 episode a week, like the Nine Club. But then after 6 weeks of doing that, I got burnt out. I was like, oh my God, this is impossible. at least to do a proper job at it, you know, because like
Yeah.
I wanted to do, I mean, I was getting started. I didn't do as much work as I do now, but I would still, you know, spend time researching my guests, coming up with questions. I didn't have the format with the friends questions yet and everything, but even just editing, for example, I was still quite new at editing audio, and to edit a 2-hour conversation was took me like weeks. So I was working like 50, 60 hours a week for the first 6 weeks. And then I was like, I don't know, this is not going to work out. I can't do this on the long term. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take a break. And then I started doing just one every whatever, like 2-3 months, whenever I could, you know. And at one point I was like, oh, maybe I should aim for one every 2 weeks. And that's actually kind of been what I've been doing for the most part for the last 3-something years. Yeah.
Amazing work. We had a Swedish podcast kind of early on that we did 100 episodes for, and then we put that to rest, and it was such a relief not to be tied up every Wednesday to
record,
you know, record and just have something new to say and get sick of your own opinions and
who were you doing that with again? Was it with Martin?
Yeah, I was doing it with Martin Utzesson of Defect,
yes,
which was
Defect,
perhaps the first online magazine ever. Martin has always been an early adapter who he's really good with technical stuff, but everything from podcast to website to European, you know, small skateboard brand to, you know, exclusive skate related clothing, and so I've been lucky enough to be his sidekick in many endeavors. But putting the podcast to rest was really, really nice.
Was it hard as well? Was it a little sad, I guess, after doing that? No? Like, done. Okay, next.
But I can see now that I'm a pretty intrigued person too, who likes to hear stories and ask questions, and to do it in English and with how accessible people are now through social media. This was right before Instagram and stuff, so the world was a bit bigger at that time. But yeah, you know, the thought comes up sometimes how fun it would be to have kept going, and the format allows for so many different things.
Sure. Yeah, you should bring it back. Maybe do a reunion episode or something. Yeah, that could be fun.
We'll see. But
please do it in English so I can follow. Yeah.
Yeah, or not. We'll see. But I think even early on, I think before you started the Friends questions, you put even more emphasis on your research. And I think every guest has been in awe of how much you find out. And I'm just curious to know how you do it.
Well, I mean, there's no secret recipe. I just dive into my guest's life and career, whoever it is, you know. Like, for example, I told you, like, and this will come out after, but I interviewed Anthony Van Engelen recently. And so, obviously, I read through his Chrome Ball interview. About a year ago, he did the Buns, so I listened to that. Of course, he had his Epically Latered, which was amazing. I read pretty much every interview I could find online. Not every, but a lot of them, like maybe 10 different ones or something. I read a very obscure one from 2001, and I was really stoked I got that one because I read in that so Abe spent a few months in Russia when he was a teenager, when he was like 16, 17.
Oh, wow.
He was fucking up in school. He was not working. He was basically about to drop out from school. And his stepdad was working in Russia at the time. And he's not Russian, but he went to Russia, you know, after the USSR collapsed and everything. So that's like mid-95 around there. Mm-hmm. And so his stepdad is over there, and he told Abe's mom, like, just send Anthony to me. Like, he'll stay with me. I'll give him some work to do at the bar that I'm, you know, setting up and everything. I'll straighten him up, you know. And so Anthony went to Russia, and actually before he went, he connected with this guy Mickey Vukovic, who is, I believe he's American, but he has some Russian origins. I don't know how exactly, but and Mickey put him in touch with some skaters over there in Russia. And so when Abe went there, he connected with a skater over there, but I think he didn't bring much like equipment with him. I think he had a board and maybe some wheels, but no trucks, like no grip tape. So anyways, like he was only there for 4 months. So it was very brief, but But that specific period of time in his life was very instrumental because he came back from that and had a different vision on his life in California and a different appreciation for skateboarding. And he was like, okay, like now I'm going to stop fucking up. I'm going to really commit to this skating thing. And then he's had the incredible career that we know him for, you know? And that was really this pivotal moment for him, at least to my understanding. And so I reached out to Mickey Vukovic, because I actually just had a question from him for another interview I had done a few weeks before, and I had been in touch with him. And so I was like, oh, Mickey, I heard that I don't know if you know Ave really well, but that you helped him, connect with skaters in Russia back in the mid-90s. And so do you have a question for Anthony? And so he sent me a question for Anthony about Russia, about being over there. And so I surprised Anthony with that. And Anthony was not at all expecting to hear from Mickey on this.
Wow.
So it was cool. He was like, oh, wow, that's pretty like... So that's the kind of thing. I think that's what I try to do is, of course, I draw a lot of inspiration from Eric, from Kronball, from Tim Anderson, his Bobshort interviews. And another mutual inspiration from all of us is this guy Nardwar. Yeah, you know him, who does the music kind of based interviews that are incredible. I mean, Tim's interviews are, there's some links, because he's also presenting objects from that guy's or that woman's past and everything. And so, yeah, that's what I aim for. I really dig deep to find, because now this format with the friends questions is what I do most of the time. Like I'll only get questions from people that know my guests. That's become pretty much the podcast. Every now and then I'll put a question of mine or do maybe first half hour questions from me and then only friends questions or something. But now I especially with people like Ave, like he's done so many interviews in his career, like there's no need to ask the same things he's answered several times. Like you might as well bring in people that know him and who will surprise him and will bring up hopefully interesting questions that he was not expecting. So that's the whole point for me, the whole what I'm aiming for. And yeah, so for the research, I just, try to find whatever I can on my guests and reach out to people that know him or her and try to send in questions. Hopefully, I try to get more audio ones because I feel like that's always more fun when it's the voice of the person and not me, reading it. And
especially when they don't know necessarily who it is until the question is asked. Always, and you can tell by the sound of their voices that it's always a surprise and a treat.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when you're recording or say the day before, how do you set up and structure the actual episode once you have everything you need to do it?
Well, basically, I do this, like, for example, again, I'm going to take, since this is the most recent episode, Ave. So I researched him, listened to his interviews, watched everything I could, watched his parts. Then I reached out to a bunch of people. And so I think 3 days before the interview, I had only questions from 9 people, like not that much. So I was like, shit, like I'm not getting enough. Like I need to dig deeper and knock on more doors. And maybe 4 hours before I had like 35.
Oof.
So I spent a lot of time hitting up people. For example, like I've hit you up probably the most during this podcast about, submitting questions for guests. But sometimes I hit up people that I've never, engaged with yet. So I introduce myself. I tell just basically what the podcast is about. And then usually it takes a few days until people, hit me back with a question. But sometimes they completely forget about it, and sometimes they have other shit that prevent them from sharing a question. And but so I spent a lot of time, just hitting up people, then hitting them up again and again and again, and basically, harassing them almost. But yeah, so that's pretty much how I do it. Like I research and then I hit up people to the point of annoying them almost, which is not great. Sometimes it's a little too much, but yeah, that's pretty much how I do it. Yeah.
And then do you structure the questions in a timeline, or do you just take them one by one?
Well, yeah. For example, for Ave, again, the very first question we did was his daughter. Actually, I hit up his wife, Anna Katerina is her name, and I asked her if she had a question she wanted to share for Ave, and she was like, I can have our daughter Aria ask a question.
Oh, nice.
So his daughter asked him something like, what was your first skateboard and what was the first trick you did on the skateboard or something like that, you know, but very sweet. So I was like, that has to be the first question, you know, like it starts there. And then I think the second one was probably Mickey Vukovic with this Russia thing, because that's also early on in his life, you know. So I do try to structure them somewhat chronologically, but sometimes some of them are just super random, like, oh, what's your favorite, I don't know, taco or whatever, like something like that. What's your favorite, whatever. And sometimes some questions connect to one another. So, for example, I had, again, on this Ave episode, I had a question from Chris Carter. And Chris Carter asked him, what was his best Fred Gall story? And then I had a question from Fred Gall as well. So I was like, oh, cool. Like, I'll just do Fred right after Chris. So he's been talking about Fred for a while. And then, now that you're done talking about it, like, let's hear from Fred, you know? And so I try to structure it like that, you know, like chronologically, basically. And then, you know, whenever there's like connections between the questions, I try to piece them together somewhat. But it's not super, super organized. It's just kind of whatever. And sometimes I'll change it even mid-interview. I'll like, maybe this should go later or whatever, you know? So it's not that structured. I kind of go with the flow a little bit, but yeah.
I think in terms of research, one thing you can tell when you're listening is that you get questions that you could never ask yourself, because they're, you know, inside jokes or you had to be there sort of things, which makes it really intimate. But I guess the risk is to get someone to finally submit the question and then someone asks the same thing already.
Oh, that's happened multiple times, like that people ask the same things. And sometimes I'll just do a joint question, like, this question is from like these two guys or whatever. And sometimes unfortunately I have to skip questions because I have just too many and we don't have enough time, you know. So yeah, it's not a super organized process, and I'm still learning, you know. I'm not a professional at doing this. I have no like journalism degree. Like I just do this because I'm a skate nerd, you know, that's it. So. And this is the formula I've developed over time, but it's not a super set in stone, you know, kind of thing.
So what makes a good interviewer, you would say?
Well, I think being a good listener, obviously, because like you said, I think for me, this podcast is about my guests. This is not about me. Like, I mean, of course, I'll react and sometimes we'll share a story if it's appropriate or if it resonates with what my guest is saying. I'm not super secretive, but still, like, this is not about me. This is about them. So I try to really leave the limelight on them. This is their moment. I want to hear from them. And so paying attention, you know, really being focused on what they're saying. And the research, like knowing about your guests beforehand, like I think that really goes a long way. Like if for example, if I didn't do any research and just jumped on a conversation with Ave, most of the things he would reference I would probably know about, but still there's plenty of stuff I'll miss. And of course, there's no perfect research, you know, like there's always going to be things I won't know about, and that's fine. But yeah, so I'd say like being a good listener, empathy. For me, those are the two main... Again, for me, like Eric's interviews are the best because they're so well researched, because they're kind of funny. They're serious, but in a funny kind of way, not that serious, you know.
Yeah, and I think as a skate nerd, you really appreciate his interviews of asking about the stuff that used to be rumors or things you might heard through the grapevine, and to actually have it firsthand, and obviously the credibility he has with the people he interviews. But what about the opposite, especially in the podcast world? I would guess, what's the worst thing an interviewer can do in your opinion?
Well, I mean, making it all about themselves, you know, like kind of, for example, if you're interviewing someone and then the person is like, oh, like, I don't know, I did a switch flip over this thing. Oh, yeah, I did a switch flip the other day. Like shut up, you know, like we don't want to hear about your switch flips. Like, this is not about you, you know, like, so interrupting and making it all about you and, you know, kind of bringing it to yourself. Like, I don't know, that annoys me. I don't honestly know really any podcasts that really, really do that. I don't want to say bad things about the Nine Club because, again, they've been a huge inspiration for me. And I still tune in, when the guests are cool and that I want to listen. But for me, what I think lacks in their process is not that research. It's really, they're just there, they're hanging out. And it feels more like a hangout. It's not like a real interview. But I think, again, it's because it's filmed. It's over there in California. It's Chris Roberts, Kelly Hart, Jerron Wilson. These guys are giants in skateboarding culture. I'm nobody. I'm this guy in France over a Zoom call, So it's not at all the same relationship. Like if Ave goes to the Nine Club, it's a whole different setting than being on a Zoom call with Quentin from Beyond Boards. And I think that really puts me in an interesting place because I'm really an outsider, There's no connections with me, for example, to any skate companies or media or nothing. Mm-hmm. So he can talk all the shit he wants. Like he's not gonna offend me,
Yeah.
So I think that also puts me in a good. And I'm doing what I was criticizing. I'm making this about myself, but.
I mean, this time around it is. But yeah, one definition of perspective is. You can never have perspective on something you're in the middle of. You have to be an outsider to have a perspective, and I think that can be problematic when you're too close to your guest or the whole phenomenon of skateboarding or whatever you're doing it about.
Yeah.
So I agree, and I think you're doing an amazing job that way. And
thank you.
What has been your best interview so far?
Again, I'm not the best judge of that, but. I'll tell you the ones I've enjoyed the most, maybe. Mm-hmm. Again, Eric Kronball was number 42. That was a very special moment for me because, as I've been saying this multiple times already throughout this interview, but he's someone that I've admired for years. It took a long time to book him as well, like to convince him to do the podcast. I don't know if he's shy, but he's not a super he doesn't like to be in the limelight as well. So he wasn't like super stoked to do a podcast at first, I think. And he was kind of, sure, we'll do it one day, whatever. So it took, I don't know, maybe 6 months or a year until I could finally convince him. And so when he did, we ended up having a really, really nice chat because it was an interview, but it felt like we were talking amongst peers, I didn't feel like he was like so far away from me. Like he felt super accessible and humble and nice and interesting and shared so many great insights and advice. And I think the surprise questions at the end were really surprising for him. Like I got some questions from people that he didn't expect, and he was like, "Oh, that's so cool," whatever. And so that was one that really, really sticks out to me. Like that one was really cool. And probably the one that brought me the most sense of accomplishment or satisfaction was Greg Hunt. That was episode 60. That was a year and a half ago or something. Greg is, of course, like a giant in our culture. His videos are so iconic and everything. And I didn't even dream of ever having him, but I don't really remember how. I interviewed Farron Golding a while back, not long before him. And Farron, I think preparing for my interview with Farron, he told me about a few people I could reach out to for surprise questions for other people. It's like, you could hit up Greg Hunt, and he gave me his email. It's like, Greg Hunt's email, perfect. It's like, okay. And so I shot an email to Greg, and Greg responded like, sure, yeah, I'll send a question for Farron, sounds good, whatever. And I was like, by the way, I'd love to do an interview with you, and he was like, yeah, sure, let's do it, okay. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God. And then it took a few months until we could actually make it happen. I think he was in France over the summer of 2023. He came here for a book signing. And so I went to the book signing. I met him over there. We had already been talking for a little bit about doing the interview. And we actually considered doing the interview when he was here in Paris.
Oh, okay.
But he was very busy. He was filming for a Vans project or something. And he had this book signing and he was just here for a few days. So he was very, very busy. So he told me like, drop by the book signing thing if you want, and let's do the interview in a few weeks when I'm back in LA. And so I went, I got there, I shook his hand, bought his book, we talked for 5 minutes, and went home. And then I think we did the interview maybe 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. And the day of the interview, we had set an appointment at like maybe 7 p.m. or something for me here. And so it was probably 10 a.m. for him in California. And for half an hour, he didn't log on to the Zoom call. So I was like, shit, like he must have forgotten about it. I don't know. Something came up, whatever. He didn't text me, nothing. So I was bummed, you know. I was like, oh, fuck, I've been waiting for this for so long. Like, it's not happening and whatever. And so I got on the phone with my cousin for something else, complete, you know, just was like, okay, making peace with it. Like, oh, it's fine, whatever. And then eventually at like 7:30 or something, Greg sent me an email like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just woke up. My kids are not here. I overslept and I'm so sorry. I can do the interview right now. And I was like, okay, yeah, sounds good. So we got on the Zoom call. And we started, and you know, it's Greg Hunt, and he has a busy life. He's a legend. And I was like, I'm lucky if he gives me even half an hour or something. And I was like, how much time do you have? He's like, you know what? My kids are not here. This is my first day off in, I don't know, 3 years or something.
Wow.
Maybe not 3 years, but like a long time.
Yeah.
And he's like, I was thinking of maybe listening to music and playing Legos this afternoon. So I have all the time in the world. So I was like, oh, don't tell me that twice. Like, oh my God. And so we started and we talked for like 3 hours. And it was amazing. It was so cool. And I remember we hung up from the Zoom call and I had such a burst of adrenaline, of joy, you know, from kind of like landing a trick, I guess, you know, like a trick that you've been wanting to get for so long. And fuck yeah, I was so stoked. I was really, really happy. And that's I don't know if that's one's my best interview, but it's definitely one that I felt the most, you know, excited about. I
didn't realize he had made so many books. That was impressive to hear. But one thing that stuck out that I still remember is 25 frames per second that he experimented with the eye, what a human eye.
Yes. Yeah, the speed it goes up. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And that 25 frames per second seems to be as close to reality as possible, which was, you know, one of those little things that just stand out that I remember. And that's probably a sign that it was a really good interview when you remember details like that. But yeah, it seemed like a really calm conversation.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And that leads us into the next question. If you don't have a third best interview.
I mean, there's so many. Like, I think maybe Josh Stewart was a special one. Because, I mean, of course, Josh's videos are equally as iconic in my book to Greg's. And he's such a nice guy, so humble, so nice, so really funny. It was a joy. Like, it's such a nice, really cool conversation. And he's become a friend ever since. Like, just like you, we haven't actually met in person, but I feel like he's a friend, you know?
Yeah.
And he's been so kind to me. He's helped out with questions for multiple guests. He's been such a big supporter of the podcast as well. And so I was really stoked on that interview. And it worked well in the sense that it got a lot of listens and, you know, attention. And so that's one I was really proud of and really stoked on.
Yeah, he's a master. He's probably one of those that everyone who's ever made a skateboard video wants to have his take on making skateboard videos and the aesthetics and everything. And what about the other way around? What have been some of the hardest interviews? Not necessarily the worst, but the hardest to make or to get the conversation going, or where the vibe has gone off due to a sensitive question or something. Take us behind the scenes.
Nothing too difficult has ever happened, fortunately for me. But I mean, it wasn't necessarily that difficult or whatever. But it was. I did this interview with Ben Duren, the guy who made the first Cliché video. He was like the Cliché TM and filmer at the time, and he also was a TM for Globe Europe or something. So I did this interview with Ben, but Ben doesn't speak really good English, and he's French like me, so it was a little awkward to have to speak English with a French person. I don't know if you remember, but at the very beginning I was doing some interviews in French a little bit and some in English. But I don't remember at what point, but the last interview in French must have been probably with this guy Jérémy Gramblat, who's like a skate agent. He represents like Vincent Milou, he represents Aurélien Giraud. But then after him, I was like, it looks like from my statistics, most of the listeners are in the US, in Canada, and the UK. It makes not much sense to keep doing a podcast in French. And there's already an excellent French podcast called Big Spin, who covers interviews with skaters in French. So I was like, there's no real need for another French skateboarding podcast. So I might as well do it in English. And also it will be, everybody can tune in. You know, if it's in French, it's only French listeners. And so I asked Ben if he would, you know, be willing to do the interview in English. And he was like, yeah, sure. I don't speak English that often anymore, but I'm willing to give it a try. And so we got on this Zoom call, and it was the longest interview I've ever done. It lasted 7 hours.
Whoa.
It was ridiculously long. I think we started at like, I don't know, 9 in the morning or 10 and went well into the afternoon, like 3 or 4. We were like starving. He was exhausted. I was over it. It was still a nice chat. It was interesting, but it was just so long. And that episode took me forever to edit because there was just so much content. It was just so tiring. So yeah, that one was just a mountain to get over, you know. So, and I'm trying to think. I've been lucky to not have too bad experiences so far. Some interviews didn't work out quite as I hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to throw anybody under the bus because, you know, sometimes, like we're doing right now, these people are gracing me with their time and some stories and everything. And sometimes it's not the best moment for them for whatever reason. They're going through some shit. They have a busy schedule. They have something going on in their lives and they're not fully engaged. And so sometimes I feel like some interviews, we weren't quite connecting as much. And it's fine. I mean, it can't be extraordinary every single time. It has to be not great sometimes and sometimes even terrible. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I haven't had any, really gnarly or horrible experience so far. So.
What's the biggest fuck up that you have done? Have you ever not recorded or forgot about an interview or anything?
No, I think, no, for the most part, I've been pretty... It's happened multiple times that my guest's recording didn't work out for some reason, or even mine stopped working at some point. I didn't realize. That means everything happens and it's fine. But nothing too crazy.
What are some of the moments or questions or answers with guests that have really stood out, that really blew your mind, of someone sharing something that they had never told before or that was extra interesting? Do you have any over the last 100 episodes that just that you think you'll remember forever? Or funny stories?
I mean, I would have to dig deep. It's not necessarily specific answers or specific moments, but it's more like because, like, as you know, for most of the people that I interview, I actually never met them in person, and this is the only interaction we've ever had or will probably ever have. And so some of them really stuck with me. For example, recently I interviewed John Gardner. Mm-hmm. You know, he was a pro skater and he transitioned into like mental health advocacy. And I actually met with John in Bordeaux in October. He was at the Connect Festival. That Leo Vals was putting together. And I actually wanted to get John for a long time on the podcast. I've been following his career for a long time and I was a big fan. And I had reached out to him, I don't know, 4 years ago, a long time ago. And at the time, it didn't work out, and we ended up getting in touch for, that's what happened. I got in touch with him for that John Rattray interview I did a while back, and because they're kind of doing similar, projects around mental health somewhat. Mm-hmm. And so I asked John Gardner if he would want to provide a question for John Rattray. Mm-hmm. And so John Gardner sent me one, and then we kept in touch, and I knew he was coming to Bordeaux, and so I met him in Bordeaux. And when I met him, he's like such a calming presence. He's someone who I think he meditates. He's obviously someone who takes great care of himself. He's a deep thinker. And you really feel it when you're with him. He's like, you feel it in the presence of a superior being is a little too much, but like he's like in a different reality kind of, And I was very inspired by him, just these 5 minutes we shared before going back into a conference of some sort. And I was like, wow, this guy, like the way he lives his life, he goes through life, and this joy, this kind of very calm presence and a lot of empathy and, very kind person. And I was like, wow, this guy is really inspiring. And we did that chat. And I think us meeting beforehand really helped us, have a better chat probably than that we eventually had over Zoom. And everything he said was really very inspiring for me. Like he said a bunch of things. There's not necessarily one thing that sticks out. So yeah, he's someone I really enjoyed interviewing and connecting with, and was very, very inspired by everything he had to share. Yeah.
Who has been the most different from your what you thought?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. It's not a great answer, but that's what comes to mind right now. But I did one with Michael Burnett a while ago, and I heard that he was very sarcastic and kind of a shit talker, and kind of a tough guy. And so I was honestly really nervous interviewing him. But he was a sweetheart. He was really nice. He was sarcastic, but he didn't give me shit. He was not like making fun of me or giving me shit. You know, he was really nice to me. But he's like he's no bullshit. You know, like he's. And so I really enjoyed it, but I was scared. I was expecting him to be a lot more, you know, like intimidating and just wouldn't hesitate to say I'm doing a terrible job or something, you know. And he was much nicer than what I expected. So
nice.
Yeah.
One of my favorite skate interviews is the Bunt interview with Jake Phelps. There's a lot of good one-liners and sound bites, but he starts the whole thing off by telling them off of not to call him Phelps or Phelper if they don't know his dad. You can tell how difficult it was to get back on the horse.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Who are top 3 to 5 dream guests that have not been on the pod yet?
Oh, that's easy. I have them on the whiteboard behind me.
On the dream.
Yeah. I have had the same top 3 for a while now, but the top 3 people I really want to get are Ed Templeton, Jacob Harris, and Spike Jonze.
Mm-hmm.
I think Ed Templeton and Jacob Harris could happen. Hopefully will happen, but I don't know. I mean, I can't force them, of course. But I've talked with both of them, and hopefully that will happen at some point one day. And Spike Jonze seems like a more unrealistic one. But I've talked with his agent, who apparently brought it to his attention. And I don't know, like at this point, it's kind of like, yeah, he's busy right now. Try again in a few months, whatever. So we'll see. But I'm not giving up, because I've interviewed a lot of people that know him personally. You know, like Aaron Meza.
Uh-huh.
Well, I didn't do an interview with her, but I've been in touch for a long time with Megan Baltimore from Krailtap and Girl.
Oh, she would be interesting.
Oh yeah, I've asked her, of course, and she said no. But so I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm gonna insist.
Maybe she could ask Rick Howard for you.
I mean, I'd love to have him as well. I got a question from Rick for Ray Barbie when I interviewed Ray, and I was so stoked. I was like, wow, Rick Howard is so cool. But I think I don't think he enjoys doing interviews at all. Like I'm sure the 9 Club have been on his ass for. Since the beginning.
Never hear him talk. What an amazing, entrepreneur, but more than anything, skater. Mm-hmm. And his take on, he's like the evergreen tree. Everything he touches or with his feet turns to gold.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jim Thiebaud, has he been?
Well, he shared. I met him in Bordeaux at the Connect Festival. He was there, so it was amazing to meet him. At one point, I remember the first night I was there, and Leo gave a speech, and like some of the organizers, and then there was like a party at the kind of HQ of the whole event. And so I was there, but I was like we've been talking about my sobriety. I tend to try to escape, moments when people are starting to get drunk, because I'm not feeling super comfortable anymore. So I was like, I'm gonna bounce. But at one point I got in a conversation with Jim Thiebaud and Ted Barrow, and I was like, what a fucking moment. I'm here in Bordeaux talking to these 2 legends, and I've interviewed Ted, and I've been in touch with him for a while, and he's such a nice guy, and he's been a real supporter as well of the podcast. And Jim, I had been in touch with him a few times. He's contributed questions for other people, and he likes my podcast. Like, he told me he listens to it sometimes, and wow. I was so honored to chat with him. And so when I left Bordeaux, I texted him about this whole Connect special episode I was doing about the festival, and he told me, like, let's do a little Zoom call and you can ask me your questions. And it lasted, I think it lasted 10 minutes, the Zoom call. It was very, very quick. So I did do an interview with Jim Thiebaud, but it was
nice.
It was a tiny 10-minute little thing. And I don't think he would do a full one, but I've asked him. He's never said yes or no, but I don't think he really wants to. He definitely doesn't need to, but hopefully I can convince him one day. Yeah.
And there's a lot of people in that house that would be interesting, like Frank Gerver and Julian Stranger and Mark Gonzalez.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's a couple that are really silent, but that would be really interesting to hear, especially about stuff like you are into beyond skateboarding.
Yeah.
And except getting all those people on, which is a job that could, of course, go on forever. The list just grows as time goes, probably. But what would be your dream scenario for the whole pod for the future if you could do anything with it?
That's a good question. And it's an interesting question to try to explore now that I've reached this goal of getting to 100 episodes, because that was my goal for the longest time. And I was honestly really thinking seriously about calling it quits afterwards, like getting there, crossing that line and being like, okay, 100 is great. It's a good number. It's a cool way to wrap this up. But I still there's still so many people, like we've been talking about some of the people I'm still dreaming of interviewing, and I have already planned, I probably won't mention these guys because I haven't done them yet. But anyways, like some people I'm scheduled to interview, and I mean, there's still so much to explore. I honestly don't really have a vision for it. I want to keep it like I've been doing since the beginning, which is kind of day by day or episode by episode, and just trying to just keep that fire burning and that desire alive, you know? I think once I get to a point where I feel like there's nobody that I'm super excited to interview anymore, and that I have better shit that I want to do actually than do this podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe at this point is the moment that I should quit. But right now I don't have anything that I'd rather be doing, you know, like I want to be doing this. I feel like I've been doing this for a long time, and to get to this point, these many episodes, to get people like Ave and all the people that I've been, you know, so fortunate and lucky to get on. And I want to keep doing it and see where this takes me, because, you know, I've got Ave, I've got Josh Stewart, hopefully at Templeton, maybe Eric Costin one day, maybe Spike Jones. So I want to keep, you know, digging and hopefully get more and more exciting people. And in the meantime, because that's one aspect of it, which is getting my dream guests, you know, kind of. Yeah. But then there's also another part is just exploring the outskirts of skateboarding, you know, people that are doing interesting stuff. And so, for example, I don't know, like, I was mentioning Danny Abuhawa earlier, Sandra Holskins, Patrick Igongo, like all these people have interesting contributions to skateboarding culture. They're not necessarily dream guests in the same sense that Costin or Guy Mariano would be, you know. But still, I think it's extremely interesting to talk to them and to connect with them and learn from them, because that's also
painting the whole picture.
Yeah.
And why are you so? I mean, I've mentioned this many times in our text messages, but why are you so hesitant about making it a business or getting money involved?
Well, honestly, for a long time, I was really hoping that it would happen. I really, really hoped that either a media or a brand would knock on my door and would, you know, tell me like, okay, let's put an Adidas ad, let's put a Vans ad in the beginning of an episode, and let's give you $500 a month or so. I don't know. I'm just dreaming, but. That was something I really, really wanted, because, I've been talking about the Bunt and the Nine Club, and these two have become businesses. Even though the Bunt, I think the two Bunt guys, Safus and Donovan, they have like real jobs on the side, and it's just a side thing for them. But I think they're still making a little bit of money out of it, and good for them, because they're doing a lot of work and good work. So I salute their efforts, and they definitely deserve it. But I think I'm still too small, in the sense that my podcast is still too small in terms of the amount of viewers or listeners that tune in. So I've definitely knocked on, sponsors' doors to ask if they would be interested in sponsoring the podcast. And I've had some, discussions with some brands, and some were somewhat interested, but then it fizzled out. And so I for the longest time, I was really, really wishing that somehow, some way I would make money out of this. But then at some point I was like, well, maybe this is not the way to go about this. Like, I should just keep doing this for the love of it, because this is what originated this whole project, is this my love of skateboarding, my curiosity for everybody in that culture. And that should really be my main focus and where I put my energy, and not into desperately, trying to get sponsors or a partner of some sort. And I've been mentioning Eric all along this interview, and he's been doing his thing forever, for like 15 years almost, and with no sponsors, no help whatsoever. And of course, he's worked a little bit at Nike, and now he works with Closer magazine, which he has an interview in every issue. So I hope he's getting a little bit of money through that. But I'm sure like this is like ridiculous amounts of money. Like, he's definitely not making a living out of it. Like, he has a proper real job as a copywriter. I don't know who he's working with currently, currently, but anyways, I've always admired that he's doing it this way. He's independent. He's not tied to any company. So whoever's talking to him, he's not linked to any, skateboarding brand or crew. Like he's his own thing, operation. So, and I really want to be the same thing, kind of, in my own way. And I think doing this without the help of any sponsors is probably the best way to go about it. So.
That's a beautiful take, I think, and on a journalistic level, it's also important to view podcasting and the things we write as a form of journalism that is affected by who's paying. Yet at the same time, I think being as humble as you are, but also with as much integrity, it can be a bit of a break sometimes on the potential. So maybe put the word out there that if you need a podcaster for your symposium, conference, wedding,
yeah.
or birthday party,
Bar mitzvah.
Quentin. You do bar mitzvahs too?
No, not yet, but I'm willing to give it a try. Why not?
Beyond bar mitzvahs. Okay, this interview, Quentin, is coming to an end, but I do have... When I was doing my research, I started to hit up former guests and soon realized that this would take forever if we were to go through all the questions. So I decided to be egoistic and just do it myself and asking all those questions that I've been thinking about throughout these 100 episodes, where you get small glimpses of yourself every once in a while, but you're very... Like you said, you don't go into the limelight taking over the story. But I do have two questions, not necessarily from listeners. I don't know if they are listeners, but one is from someone who wants to know what your secret to a balanced life is, and I wonder if you can guess who asks that question.
Balanced life.
A balanced life.
I mean, yeah, that could be anybody.
Does Sarah ring a bell?
Well, Sarah was my roommate for a while. Yeah. Sarah Demes? Is that her? Yeah. Oh, wow. How did you get in touch with her? Wow.
That's for me to know and you for never to find out. But she wants to know the secret to having a balanced life.
I mean, yeah, that's I don't have a balanced life. Like everybody, you go through phases in life. I mean, I'm not like, there's moments where you feel like your life is really well balanced and it's all great, and sometimes it's absolute shit. But for me, the foundation of my life now in this new chapter in my life is my sobriety. Like, that's what I've been building upon. Like, this whole podcast, this conversation wouldn't be happening if I didn't decide to go sober 5 years ago. So that, for me, that's really this foundation. And then a big aspect of my life that you mentioned is veganism, but that's just my own belief system and the way I like to eat and, respect life all over, whether it's humans or animals. And exercising, of course, is very important. I like to run. Despite my shitty ankle, I can run, and that's a huge part of my balance. Like, if I can't run for any reason, I feel depressed. Like, I feel shitty. Just like, skaters that skate regularly, they're gonna feel a little shitty if they don't skate for 5-10 days or something. And yeah, and I guess just taking care of yourself, eating well, proper food, proper exercise, feeding your brain, reading, having conversations, meaningful conversations, whether it's over Zoom calls or in person, preferably in person whenever you can. All of that, it contributes to a balanced life, I think.
Nice. Thank you. And okay, so here's a surprise question for you.
Would you rather become a man who lives off olive oil and cheap bread, or listen all day long to Les Yeux Revolver forever?
Okay, so this is one of my good friends, Benoit Donofrio. He's also known as Le Sobrelier. He's a sommelier, and he's sober as well. We worked together in the wine bar where I last worked before I stopped drinking. And he's a master. Like, he makes incredible non-alcoholic beverages that he makes himself, like fermented drinks that are just incredible. And a really funny guy, really nice guy. And we worked together, and so he asked if I would rather eat olive oil and cheap bread for the rest of my life, or listen to Les Yeux Revolver from Marc Lavoine, because that's a shitty song we used to listen to a lot when we would get drunk at the wine bar where we worked. we would listen to this song amongst other shitty ones while drinking really good wine. I mean, that's a ridiculous question, but I guess probably the olive oil and cheap bread. Yeah, that never really quite gets old. It's always pretty good. Whereas this song is just annoying. So yeah, I'll go with the olive oil and cheap bread.
Good call. And the last question is the same question that you always ask your guests, especially when there's not voice notes as questions, and that I one day hope will turn into a Beyond Boards book. But what has skateboarding or this podcast taught you so far?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. Skateboarding in itself, of course, I mean, that's what everybody will say, but it taught me about resilience, about determination, delayed gratification. I discovered so much, of the music, the movies, the culture that I consume to this day has been in large part shaped by skateboarding. And doing this podcast, I've been just really so pleasantly surprised by how friendly, how amazing this whole skateboarding community is. And going to connect in Bordeaux really was a surreal experience for me, because I've been doing this podcast mostly over Zoom calls for 4 years. So it's been mostly doing this from the comfort of my room and my apartment. And I don't really go to many skate premieres or events. So I don't skate anymore, so I don't really go to skate parks. So to be all of a sudden in Bordeaux and hanging out with Ted Barrow and Jim Thiebaud and Chris Lawton and Leo Valls and John Gardner, and it was a trip. It was incredible. And some people even came to me and told me, like, "Oh, you're the guy who makes Beyond Boards." Like, they recognized my voice from hearing me because I was nearby. Mm-hmm. So it was really cool, because all of a sudden I just measured how that people are actually listening to me, or not me, but like to my interviews, to my work. And it's because I've been always doing this first and foremost for myself, for my own pleasure, for just a kid in me who's stoked to interview Ave or whoever. But to know that some people actually tune in and enjoy them is so cool. It's so gratifying, so nice, But yeah, to come back to your question, what I've learned through doing the podcast is basically that the skate community is amazing. It's such a wonderful community. People are so friendly, just so supportive. People like you who have been huge supporters of my work since the very beginning. I guess the connections, the whole network I've built doing this podcast it's not necessarily something I learned, but it's something that I'm so grateful for, all these connections, meaningful connections I've built through doing this podcast. And it's wonderful. Like, even the other day I was mentioning him before, Patrick Igongo, who is on the Mostly Skateboarding podcast, which is a great podcast as well. We became really good friends, and I met him in Bordeaux. We had a really nice dinner and really, really connected. And he sent me Jacob Rosenberg's book that Jacob signed for me. I got an autograph from Mike Carroll in it. And the other day he was like, "Oh, give me your shirt size. I'm going to send you a Slow Impact shirt." And sure enough, I got a Slow Impact shirt that I'm wearing right now, actually.
Nice.
And he sent me also some magazines, like a Free Skate mag, and it's so cool, to have these meaningful friendships that started as doing an interview with you, with him, with all these people that have become friends over the course of doing this podcast is something that I really am super proud of and really grateful for.
Yeah, and I think when we started planning this episode, it was for you to be the last episode, number 100, when you were going to put the podcast to rest. And getting to know you through the research, I know that you're everything has to be in order and you're almost a perfectionist. So when you now reach 101, maybe 102, depending on how you count this, it probably means that you won't be able to stop until at least 200, maybe 1,000. So in conclusion, as the cineast you are, I want to paraphrase or quote the last words in Casablanca, which are...
I'm not sure. I don't remember. I've watched it, but so long ago, I can't remember.
This is just the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Amazing.
Quentin,
John.
On behalf of all your guests that I've talked to, and I've talked to a lot of them, and all the listeners, and especially from me, thank you so much for the work you put in and giving us Beyond Boards.
Thank you, John. Thank you for doing this, and thanks for the kind words. Thanks for doing all this research and for this wonderful conversation. And I hope we meet in person soon. Yeah, hopefully in the near future. I need to make a trip out to Malmö.
That was it for my conversation with Quentin Delille. Follow him on Instagram and tune in 2 weeks for a new episode of Beyond Boards.